Hi, my name's Alan Smith. In this webcast, I'm continuing the series of looking at the Python programming language from a C# developer's perspective. And this is a fairly short webcast, looking at working with functions in Python. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more webcasts in this series. Okay, so what I'm going to look at in this webcast is converting this C# code into Python code. Now, C# doesn't really allow us to work with functions. We have to work with methods which are present on a class. So to get as close to that as possible, what I've done is basically generated some static methods on this class. So we've got sayHello that takes a string and just prints out hello. We've got a method to add two numbers together. We've got a subtract method to subtract two numbers. And this takes a default parameter value of 1 for y. And then we've got a divMod method that's going to perform a divide and a modulo operation and return two values in a tuple. And I've also got a ToDo method that currently doesn't have any implementation. Okay, so you can see all of those run, the code compiles, and we do get the expected outputs. Okay, so the main difference in Python is we're going to be working in functions. We haven't defined a class. However, we will look at classes later on in Python and look at creating methods within a class. So I'm going to start with a hello method. So we use def to say that we're defining a function. The name of the function is going to be sayHello, and I'm going to take in the parameter of name. And we can print the name out there in the console. So that should be fine. I know that I don't have to specify void if the function isn't going to return anything. And I don't need to specify the type of the parameter that I'm passing. So to call the function, I'll just copy paste the function name and call it with the parameter of my name, Alan. So I'll set the Python project as the startup project. And you can see it's saying hello, Alan. So next I'm going to implement the add method as a function. And that's fairly straightforward. We use the same return commands there. And notice we're using colons at the end and we're using tabs for indentation. And to call that method, I can just drop this code in here. Added is equal to add 2 and 7, and then we can just print added. And that works fine. I'm going to copy paste the add function, and I can change it to subtract. It's going to be x minus y. However, this method is going to have a default parameter. So I'm going to specify that y is equal to 1 if that parameter is not specified. So let's create some code to call that method. And you can see it works fine. It's got the answer of 5. However, here I can also remove the second parameter. And it does 12 minus 1 using that default parameter. So that's doing the same functionality as we'd implemented in C#. We can also name the parameters as we pass them in, though the syntax is slightly different in Python. So I would say that x is equal to 12, y is equal to 6, and you can see that's performing that operation there. So you've got slightly different syntax for specifying those parameters than we do in C#. So I'm going to look at the divMod, and this is one advantage where I prefer Python over the C# implementation. I'm going to do def divMod, specify x and y as parameters. I won't bother doing a zero check on y to prevent divide by zero exceptions. So what we can see in C#, we can only return one type from this method here. So in order to return two values, I can either create a class with those two values, or I can create this tuple. And here you can see when we're calling this, we've got divMod item 1 and divMod item 2. However, in Python, we can return more than one thing. So here I can return x divided by y and x modulo y. Just change the name of that to follow the naming convention, and we can make a call to that method. So here I'm calling the method with the values 12 and 5. And this will give me back these two variables, div and mod. Okay, so I can use an f string to print those out into the console. Okay, so this isn't doing exactly what we want. We're getting the div as 2.4. The mod is correct here. Whereas in C#, if I do exactly the same thing, you can see it gives us the correct values. This is because in C# these are going to be integer operators and it's going to return an int. However, in Python, it's going to return a float data type. And you can see here that div is a float and mod is an int data type. So when we do that divide operation between two integers, it gives the response as a float. So what we need to do here is to use this operator here. In C# that will be the comment operator, but the double divided sign will do an integer division. And that's giving the correct answers there. And you can see that div is now an integer data type. So when you're working with Python libraries, it's very common for some of the functions to return multiple values. So lastly, we've got the ToDo function, where I've got a function definition, but I'm going to do the implementation at a later point in time. So let's do the same thing in Python. Actually, this is actually a method because it's part of a class. So the ToDo function, you can see it's complaining, saying indentation error when we get to this line of code here. And that's because it was expecting something here. You know, I could put a comment in here saying we're going to implement this, but we're still breaking the syntax. So in order to correct the syntax, I can use the parse keyword here that basically says we're not going to provide an implementation yet. And now that works fine. So hopefully that's been a useful introduction for C# developers who want to start coding in Python and want to start creating functions. I will mention that Python is also a functional programming language, so you can define functions and return functions as parameters from other functions and call those functions. And that's used very often in machine learning algorithms, when you define a loss function and an activation function, for example. We'll be taking a look at how that works in future webcasts.